This is the voice of Idaho agriculture. Each week, we bring you agriculture news and perspective. Stay tuned to this week's Idaho Farm Bureau's weekly podcast from the state capitol. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jake Putnam, and happy Thanksgiving. The cost of a traditional Thanksgiving meal for 10 remains below $50 this year. Mike Clements has more.
After 3 years of declines, the cost of a traditional homemade Thanksgiving Day meal is up 1 cent, according to the American Farm Bureau Federation. AFBF economist John Newton says the annual survey found the cost is still less than $5 per person.
Our survey shows that this year the cost of a Thanksgiving dinner remains in line with prior year levels. The cost of a dinner for 10 came in at $48.91. That's 1 cent higher than what we saw in last year's survey.
Newton says the survey includes many staples of the Thanksgiving Day meal.
We include the cost of potatoes, pumpkin pie mix, pie shells, green beans, peas, stuffing, all the fixings that you need to make a homemade meal on Thanksgiving. And this year the cost of the turkey came down to $20.80 for a 16-pound turkey. That's down 90 cents or 4% from prior year levels for that 16-pound bird.
Because Americans enjoy the most affordable food supply in the world, Newton says additional menu items are affordable.
The average American doesn't know that 8% or 8 cents of every dollar that they spend on food goes back to the farmer. And because food is so affordable in America, it's easy to buy all the extra fixings that you want, or even buy things like an organic turkey or additional brining or any of those factors on your Thanksgiving meal.
Michael Clements, Washington.
USDA analysts forecast more export sales to China this year, even without the new trade deal. Gary Crawford reports.
Even without any new trade agreement with China, USDA analysts are forecasting $1 billion boost in U.S. ag product sales to that country during the new 2020 fiscal year. USDA's chief economist Rob Johansson told us.
We've seen China is going to need more pork in particular exports, but also they're going to need to also import more soybeans from the United States for a number of reasons, one of which is that they weren't as able to import as much from South America as we expected, but also because they're going to be building out their livestock sector after the impact of African swine fever.
But he's quick to point out that even though
there is some optimism out there on a potential deal,
this better forecast for sales to China, not based on that, not based on an end to tariffs, but rather just on things as they were when the forecast was made. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
And the 2019 sugar beet crop is in, and we talked to the Nissa-Nampa Beet Growers Association president, who says the crop is average, but in this case, average is excellent. 2019 beet crop was a roller coaster ride all season. Cold, wet weather delayed planting, but when the sun came out, they planted in just a 5-day window in April.
So a few acres got planted, and they did well.
That's Galen Lee of New Plymouth, who not only farms, but is the president of the Nissa-Nampa Beet Growers Association and past president of the American Sugar Beet Growers Association.
Start out with harvest, things are going really good. Then the October forecast came, and some places had single digits or maybe even a little lower in some places, middle end of October. So that was a real challenge. You can't pile the beets if they're frozen, so we had to let them sit out in the field. Harvest was suspended on this side of the state for 5 days, for a week or a little better on the eastern side of the state. Then once the beets thawed out and weather warmed up a little bit to where we could store them, we started harvest again, but the tops had been froze down so bad that they were really, really hard to defoliate. We had a real challenge trying to get those off. Have to go over a couple times with the defoliator or really slow down or whatever you had to do to make it happen, but we did. Got the crop in, so pretty much all the beets were harvested here.
And while Idaho growers barely squeaked by, other parts of the country were not so lucky.
And across the country, there's about 170,000 acres that aren't going to be harvested this year. That's about the size of Amalgamated's total growing acreage, and to put it in further perspective, that's the same as a mile-wide strip from Pocatello to Boise. So that many acres of beets are going to be left in the ground this year across the country. So we were fortunate. We got ours out. Had a little bit of a delay, a few challenges, but not like other people have had.
Mexico, under agreement, will make up sugar supply shortfalls. Market prices will be up from last year, and despite a late start, the quality of the 2019 crop is still good.
Yields were right about average, so it wasn't record-breaking, but we hit about average. Like I say, the beets kind of made up for some lost time in the summer, and off we went. So yields were average, so we were happy with that. Could have been worse.
Preliminary numbers show that yields are average, 39 tons per acre, but sugar content is good to excellent, 16 to 17%, and this year's crop should top 177,000 acres in a season of highs and lows.
That's it for this week's podcast. You can drop us a line on Twitter or on Facebook and tell us what you thought of this week's program. For Steve Ritter, this is Jake Putnam and the voice of Idaho Agriculture.